been another crazy week, and let us pause to cool our turkeys. We've been reflecting on the effects of immigration reform, unilateralism, constitutionality, and freedom. And how well do you know the laws? You can take our immigration quiz a little later in the show and find out for yourself. Plus, get to know the man who has spent his life trying to end the drug war from just about every angle, including a surprising study that could heal victims of PTSD, including vets, if only the government would get out of the way so some of our wounded soldiers could get some efficient care. Also, will establishment Republicans ever embrace their libertarian stepchildren who promise to somehow make everyone more free? Probably not, but it's worth asking. All right, there's a lot on the table, so grab a plate and fill up. This is The Independence. Hey there, how are you? I'm Kennedy. Great to see you. Thanks for having me. Okay, very good. No one seems particularly enamored with imperialist immigration decrees. A majority of people think the system is broken, but it might take a few branches of the tree to tackle what's really wrong with our neighbors coming for a long visit. A new Wall Street Journal NBC News poll shows 48% of Americans disapprove of President Obama acting alone on immigration versus 38% who approve. And among Latinos who responded to the poll, and there were only 110 of them, 43% say they would approve of the president acting alone. 37% oppose. Now, if you're not getting insane support from a community you promised to service 6 years ago, then why now? I bet these guys know. He's the editor-in-chief of Reason Magazine, and he's lean, mean, and not too far between. It's Matt Welch. And Camille Foster. He's an entrepreneurial anarchist, the best kind, really. He's also from Free Think Media, and together we are The Independents. And let us get to know our end of the week party panel. It promises to be a good one. We've got some cutie pies. Carrie Sheffield is a columnist at Forbes.com and a fellow for the competitive Enterprise Institute. They're not conservative, they're competitive, they're competing, goodness me. And Michael Malice, he's the author of Dear Reader. If you haven't downloaded it, get it immediately today and read it by the end of the week, and there will be a quiz on Monday. Welcome back to both of you.
Thanks.
Malice, I'm going to start with you on immigration because I think you're going to have some interesting points. You are really the only immigrant on the panel.
That's true. Well, Camille, weren't you an immigrant?
My mom is an immigrant.
I was not born in America. I was born in the former Soviet Union.
Do you think that changes your perception of immigration versus other people who have the same political background?
I can't speak for other people, but I do think that, a lot of Americans have contempt for this idea that they have that immigrants are going to come over and sit on welfare. I'm like, look, I don't see just because you happen to be born in America, you can be some fat loser on welfare. If you come from Mexico, you have that right just as much as everybody else. And these people don't want to come here and do welfare. They want to come here and they want to work. And if Obama has the power to do this and the Constitution can't stop him, maybe the problem's with the Constitution and not with the president.
Okay, and let's talk about some of those constitutional issues. And Carrie, I will let you take the apple that Michael has so adeptly thrown into the air. Is there a constitutional crisis that is looming? Is unilateral action on immigration unconstitutional?
Well, I think it sets a troubling precedence. Even Jonathan Chait, the liberal columnist, pointed out that if we have this, who's to say some guy on the other side against his team would do something that he disagrees with, whether that's ignoring some enforcement of environmental policy or discrimination. So I think it sets a really bad precedence for picking and choosing. You're like a cafeteria president about what laws you want to enforce and which ones you want to ignore.
What's wrong with the cafeteria?
What's wrong with lazy people coming here and getting fat and enjoying welfare?
Nothing.
Exactly. Thank you, Michael Malice. Someone had to say it. So let's talk about other groups that have supported the president, namely the African-American community.
Oh.
Michael Malice pointed out earlier on that they might be a little bit offended that the president is servicing Latinos right now.
I don't know. I'm not an expert on that sort of thing. I don't really traffic in sort of identity politics stuff. Even when I'm looking at the polls, I'm skeptical of a lot of those numbers.
You're skeptical of your own name.
Well, I'm skeptical of those insights. This notion that black people are necessarily not in favor of amnesty or the president's actions right now. There is something to be said, though, for the fact that there is broad support for allowing some sort of pathway to citizenship for these people. I think there is a lot of support for that, absolutely. Okay. And I don't think that, I'm a little bit torn. I totally understand the constitutional issues here. The rule of law is absolutely important. It's necessary to work together. But I also feel very strongly that if there is a person here in the United States that is interested in hiring someone who happens to live elsewhere, who is unfortunate enough to be born beyond our borders, borders, then interfering in their ability to contract together with one another is a violation of their rights. So those two things are at odds, and that is something we need to reconcile.
All right, so let's talk about H-1B visas. Can businesses decide how to give those?
Not really. I mean, they apply for them. They run out in about 6 hours, maybe 4 hours every year, the annual allotment for them.
Yeah.
And it's a big bureaucratic pain in the behind, as is a lot of immigration in general. You have to go through these processes. Sometimes the families can come along with them. Sometimes they cannot. You have to go through the government. You have to prove that you've tried in good faith to get a job to somebody else who's native born. All these things, we bureaucratize immigration so much in this country. That leads to the problem, which is the fact that we just don't have enough slots for enough people, and it becomes very, very difficult. If you want to stand in line, when people say get in line, that means, okay, you stand in line for 7 years, for 18 years, for a really long time. That's the problem.
Well, then don't get mad if people are here for 10 years. Well, you can't be mad if people are here illegally. You either have to make a more formalized, easy to interface with guest worker program, or you have to make the process getting through the line better.
The thing to get mad at, which I understand entirely, is when a president makes an executive decree that is based not on congressional intent, but against congressional intent.
Which is the difference between Bush 1 and Reagan.
And it's worth noting how far we've come. I mean, W was actually in favor of a pretty broadly inclusive guest worker program. Like, that is where the conservatives used to be on this issue. It's a little difficult to reconcile sort of where we are on it now.
Ooh, ask your friend Eric Cantor. He's not delighted at all. Well, no one is overwhelmingly in favor of the president stroking his pen, and the Republicans aren't doing themselves any favor by playing into the theatrics. Is there a more grown-up way to tackle immigration? What are the legislative repercussions of the president's imperial march to doom? I will ask you, Carrie. You're the most conservative on the panel. So how do Republicans take this challenge, and how do they handle it in a congressional manner that makes people happy who see so much discord in Washington?
Well, I think President Obama is behaving like Ted Cruz. He's basically being the Ted Cruz of the Democratic Party. So I think this is something he's trying to set the city on fire, essentially. And Republicans need to tamp it down. They need to dial it down. They need to be grown-ups. They need to not do another shutdown, in my opinion. And yeah, this is a purely naked political ploy. I mean, the fact that he's having this the same night as the Latin Grammys, I mean, come on. He's obviously trying to.
The man understands marketing on some level, though. Am I right about that, Michael Malice?
I don't think this is marketing. I think this is him giving the finger to the Republican Party. And not only is he doing it in a brazen way, his whole affect about it isn't couched in the usual leftist, this is good for America. You know, if you learned about it, you'd like it. This is like, I'm going to do this. You guys challenged me to do this, and I accept your challenge. What are you going to do about it? And I love that.
It's important to point out that George W. Bush had the same moment. It was in 2007, comprehensive immigration reform, which he talked about in the State of the Union address. It failed. It broke apart. How did he respond to that moment? He sent Michael Chertoff, who was so pro-comprehensive reform, out to say, you know what? We're going to listen to you, even though we totally disagree with you, and we're going to enforce immigration harder. We're going to build more of the wall. We're going to deport more people because you people couldn't get it together. We are going to enforce the law more. Obama's taking the exact opposite tack.
Okay, but Obama's been deporting people. You know, the highest level of deportations we've ever seen in this country happened under his watch just 2 years ago. So if he has been the deporter in chief, is this somehow, is he trying to secure his legacy as being kind and gentle with?
You don't think he's coming from conviction? I think he genuinely feels that I have the power to do so. And all the people on this panel would love it if Rand Paul freed all the nonviolent drug offenders from prison if he was president. So let's think ahead of it for a second.
No, I think we have to be careful about executive orders. When your guy or lady.
Let me finish. Hold on. I'm going to cite Jimmy Carter, everyone's favorite president, when he had that blanket amnesty for all the draft dodgers. At the time, there was hand-wringing, but in retrospect, we're glad that it was.
In which we did. Gerald Ford did it. Harry Truman did it. FDR did it for draft dodgers. It's when you go against congressional intent that I think gives a lot of even libertarians who totally love the outcome. That gives them pause of is this how we're going to? Is this the new norm of presidential behavior, and what would that look like on the next president?
What's really distressing is this was right after the election, and Obama did not see this thumping by Republicans as a mandate at all. In his press conference, he said. Basically, he pointed to turnout and said, because turnout was low, this is essentially not a mandate, so I'm going to do whatever the heck I want. You know, when he said, there is no red states of America, there is no blue states of America, he wasn't joking. There are the Barack Obama states of America. That's my way or the highway. That's what he's saying.
And he's going to have his way because he has the power to do it. So he's right and you're wrong. You know, like what are these Republicans?
And maybe he's too powerful.
Well, every president's too powerful.
Maybe that's the problem, Michael Malice.
I agree.
Finally, something we can both agree on, that men and women both look fantastic in fuchsia. Coming up later, a party drug treats suffering vets and could save the VA millions. Really? And next, another potential Hillary thwarter appears to be entering the race. We'll tell you who that is and more reasons to jab Jeb in moments. You love Sunny Day Real Estate, and I love you for being here. Welcome back to The Independence. Jeb Bush is starting to seriously flirt with the presidential nomination. Yeah, getting its phone number, buying it drinks, stalking it on Facebook. But courting Republicans is going to be pretty tough with his stance on Common Core. It's a sprawling federal education initiative. Can another Bush win on a big government if it's our government ticket? God, I hope not. Carrie Sheffield and Michael Malice, they're back and better than ever. I said you were rejoining us later in the show, which was really just next. So thanks for sitting patiently. Party people, hurrah. Carrie Sheffield, I despise Common Core. I hate it. I can't stand it.
I'm with you.
I don't understand the defenders. I believe that people who defend Common Core have never had children in public school.
Yeah.
Go.
No, okay. What they want to do, they want standards, which I totally get that. But the problem is it's like banning recess for everybody because of a couple problem children. It's like focus on the problem schools, zone in on those, don't destroy things for everybody else. I mean, the standards are ridiculous. The equations for math, they're complex for no reason.
Math alone and the testing. I mean, I've said it on the show many, many times, and I'll say it again because those of you who do math with your children at home, you know it's frustrating and it's sad and it takes the joy out of learning. And I wish there was a way for the government to get out of any form of centralized education so educators and kids could work together to make learning amazing and passionate. But Michael Malice, that's never going to happen, is it?
Well, it might happen. I mean, I look at school teachers.
I love your optimism. Tell me more.
I will. Thank you. I look at school teachers the way Chuck D looks at the police. You know, so the express purpose of public schools, for at least since 1920s, hasn't been to educate people, but to make them obedient. In other words, to break these children's spirits and to make them obey even arbitrary edicts. And that's what Common Core teaches you. No matter how absurd it is, what the person in the front of the room is telling you, you have to do it their way because that's right. And a lot of people like that. And that's sadly what the consequences for democracy are very, very dark indeed.
I believe you're right. People who enter academia and the armed forces, I think they like, you know, those imposed systems, which, you know, I don't pass judgment on people by saying that, but it's just kind of pretty obvious.
I just want to hear you talk about Common Core more because you get so fired up.
I just can't stand it. I really can't. I mean, I see education so differently now because my public education system, when I was a kid, it failed me because I failed high school. I never graduated from high school. I went on to go to UCLA. Woo! Go Bruins! Beat FC Week! Yes! However, having said that, you know, I don't want to see my children's love of learning extinguished in any way. And I don't need the federal government, I don't need someone who's running for president tell us that all 50 states have to have these same standards. It's like telling every single woman she has to read the book The Rules before she begins dating looking for a husband.
That's the problem. Everyone grew to hate No Child Left Behind on the left, and now on the right they hate Common Core. What do these two things have in common? Jeb Bush, it's alarming that he doesn't get that, and I think it's going to hobble him fatally.
Yeah, and he's not even putting up his own version of Common Core. Common Bore, that's what I say. Former Virginia Senator Jim Webb has become the first Democrat to formally throw his hat into the ring as a presidential contender.
I have decided to launch an exploratory committee to examine whether I should run for president in 2016.
Really? Tell me more.
Bring it back
Jim.
in 1987 with production value there.
Very enthusiastic.
Exactly.
Wow.
Was that C-SPAN from the Reagan years? And by the way, he worked for Ronald Reagan. But don't be fooled. That clip is not a 1987 infomercial. Webb said in his announcement that he has been an underdog candidate before and he has won. But can he capsize the Hillary juggerboat? Or get a decent backdrop for his next ad, at least. He should start a Kickstarter campaign for that. What do you think of Jim Webb? I mean, he's an interesting guy. He's not your typical Democrat, and for that, he could pique people's interest.
Yeah, he has the potential, unlike most Democrats who have been floated as potential candidates here, to actually get some Rand Paul-style votes. He's much more of a skeptic about intervention. He's very good on privacy, and he's the leading Democrat out there on criminal justice reform. He was talking about legalizing marijuana in 2009, and he's been pushing for a lot of the reforms that we begin to see and begin to talk about. So he's good on that kind of stuff, and he will talk about too much regulation on small businesses and balancing budgets. He also does a lot of income inequality and kind of typical leftoid stuff too.
And that's what scares me. He's sort of going in on the gravy for Elizabeth Warren. So I almost feel like if he goes in, Elizabeth Warren's going to feel threatened because he keeps doing these interviews, these populist economic messages, which scare me.
No different than what Jeb Bush
horrible.
is saying, though. I mean, Jeb Bush is going to run on a conservative economic populism. Is that equally scary
God
to you?
help us.
Oh, my God.
I mean, well, I'll take one slightly more right versus left. I mean, we'll see how they govern. But I don't know.
No, we won't. I promise you we won't.
I mean, he's
But you know what? The other thing about him is he worked in the Reagan administration and was Secretary of the Navy, and he quit because of budget cuts for the Navy. So it'll be interesting to see how he pivots and tries to flip-flop and say, oh, I'm so isolationist now, when historically he wasn't.
It feels like it's undoubtedly a good thing to have him in the Democratic primaries. Like, I think he could actually push that conversation on the issues that a lot of us are concerned about in the right direction.
If he stays true to that, you wanted to say something about Jeb Bush.
I think about Jeb Bush. Well, I think it's funny that he's very well known for being bilingual. So maybe education start at home, and he should teach his brother to speak one language. Huh? Am I right?
Oh, man.
Bring him back. No, but how can you be a populist when your father is the president and your brother is the president? That is literally as far removed from populism in this country as possible.
I don't think their family has a lot of money, though.
The Bushes?
That's like Hillary saying she's dead broke.
We were dead broke when we love the White House. I mean, except for those lucrative speaking and
those houses.
contracts. I mean, we had to buy a bunch of houses, the most expensive parts of the country.
On Boardwalk and Park Place.
No, I think this opens up the challenge to her because that book tour, it was like a gift. She should have done wonderfully. It should have been a rock star tour, but she totally flubbed it.
Oh, imagine what she'll do with a presidential campaign. Only time will tell. All right, thank you both, Michael and Carrie. Lovely, lovely. Compliance costs with Obamacare have shut down 43 rural hospitals right here in the United States, with more teetering on the brink. We'll jump into the latest ACA boondoggle. That is next. Please stay with us.